Welcome to our tutorial about using dynamic input. Let's begin by activating the line tool. Let's switch on dynamic input mode. Here's the toggle. It's blue when it's active. Now we can input coordinates for the first point of our line right beside the cursor rather than in the command line. 3, tab to switch between fields, 10, and press enter to register. Here's our first point. Now I'm going to specify the distance and an angle. Let's use 5 units, tab to register. At 45 degrees, press enter to accept. The next distance will be 5 units, tab to register, and an angle of 315 degrees, enter to accept. Again, a distance of 5 units, at a 225 degree angle, enter to accept. The last segment, 5 units, tab to register, angle will input 135 degrees, enter to accept. Right-click and enter to close the tool. And here's a square built at 45 degree angles. Now let's activate the rectangle tool. We're prompted to specify the first corner point. Let's say 15 units in the positive X direction. Tab to register, 15 units in the positive Y direction. Press enter to accept. Now we can specify another corner point or use another method for completing the rectangle. I'm going to right-click and select dimensions. Let's use 5 units. Enter. 5 units again and enter. Lastly here, we need to specify the location with a click in the drawing area. And here is our second square. Let's try a polygon now using dynamic input. Activate the tool. And first I enter the number of sides, 6. Enter to accept. Now AutoCAD prompts me to create a center point or to input coordinates for an edge. Let's use the edge option instead. We can press E or right-click and select edge. Let's use 16 units in the X direction, tab to register, 15 units in the Y direction. Press enter to accept. Here's our first point. Let's specify the second point of the polygon edge. 3 units, tab, at 270 degrees, enter to accept. And here we have our polygon. Let's activate the line tool again. Now I'm going to specify the first point of my line, 30, tab, 5, enter. Now what if I want to use Cartesian coordinates instead of polar coordinates? Let's right-click, Settings, go to the Dynamic Input tab. Under Pointer Input, click Settings. At the top of the window, under Format, choose Cartesian Format. Click OK, and OK again. Let's type 5, tab, 5, and press Enter. Now we're using relative coordinates. If I want to use absolute coordinates, I need to go back to the same settings window. Right-click on the Dynamic Input toggle, select Settings. Under Pointer Input, click the Settings button and select Absolute Coordinates, OK, and OK again to exit the window. Now let's type in our absolute coordinates, 40, tab to register, 10, enter to accept. We can easily switch back to relative coordinates. Just right-click and select Dynamic Input, Relative Coordinates. Let's right-click on the Dynamic Input toggle, Settings. Let's check Enable Dimension Input where possible, and click OK. Now let's place a point about here. Here's the dimension input box now. Let's enter 5, tab, at 160 degrees. Enter to accept. Under dimension input, we do have a few other options. Let's right-click on the mode toggle again, scroll to settings. Under dimension input, let's click the settings button. We can show 1 dimension input field at a time, 2, or show a number of input fields at a time. Let's opt to show 1 and click OK, OK again. Let's input 5 units, tab, and the second input, let's say 90 degrees, tab, and right-click and enter to close the tool. This concludes our lesson about using dynamic input.